You're listening to The Coaching Ladder, brought to you by 5 College Movers. Your hosts, Mike Mannix, Paul Schmurra, and Steve Marcus.
All right, I want to welcome everyone to this episode of The Coaching Ladder. We are on episode number 102, and our guest today is Coach Dave Hixon of Amherst College. And before we introduce Coach Hixon, as we always do, we like to start with our quote from Coach John Chaney that inspired the Coaching Ladder. Quote from Coach Chaney is, "As you climb, reach back and help others," like our guests always try to do on the Coaching Ladder here. So we're happy to have Coach Dave Hixon joining us today. Coach Hixon is a 2023 Naismith Hall of Famer, 826 career wins, the 2007 and 2013 NABC Division III Coach of the Year, 2007 and 2013 National Championship, and over the last 21 games versus his rival, Amherst College rival, Williams College, Coach went 17-4 in that span. Coach, we appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And we like to ask everyone, ask all of our guests, Coach, when we get started, just kind of how you grew up in the game and then into how you got the coaching bug.
Yeah, and so my dad was a coach. He coached football. He coached primarily basketball, and did some golf, baseball in the spring. He was that kind of guy. He was a coach. And so from the moment that I was old enough to understand what was going on, I was coaching. I made up a playbook for my Sandlot football team. I made up a playbook for my driveway basketball group. And, I've always wanted to coach. And as early as I mean, the people that influenced my life the most were coaches. And in my junior year in college, we were sitting around in the fall, sharing a few beers, like people do. And the question comes up, which always comes up: what are you going to be doing in 10 years? And we had a guy say he's going to be a doctor. He's a doctor. I had a guy say he's going to go in sort of an IBM type situation. He's still with IBM, just retiring. And another guy going to psychotherapy. And they turned to me and said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to be the next Amherst basketball coach." That was in 1973. I got appointed in 77. So I always wanted to be a coach. And I always thought I wanted to coach at Amherst, which was crazy.
And hired in 1977 at the age of 24?
24.
What was that like, maybe in those days, I'll say, the process of being hired at Amherst? What was that process like for you?
Well, and so I wasn't going to apply. I didn't think that I had enough resume. And one of the guys in the department encouraged me to apply. And he said, if nothing else, it'll be a great experience. And so for young coaches, I mean, really, even if you don't think you have a shot, if you get a chance to interview, it's going to make your next interview better, your next. Thought they knocked it out of the park in their first interview. You interview as much as you can. And so I interviewed. I think they brought in 7. And it was good. It was a great experience. But then I got in the final 3. And now I thought, like, okay, guys, I had my experience. Don't jerk me around now. I'm in the final 3. I'm serious about this. And, I went at it about as hard as I could. And I got 2 interviews out of it, which was great experience. And then, of course, I got the job, which was a home run.
What were the challenges taking over as a 24-year-old?
Oh, gosh. So we had just gone co-ed when I graduated in 75. Amherst was all guys before that. And so it was a little bit like going to the day camp, it was guys hanging around with guys. And you had Smith and you had Holyoke, the 2 sister schools. And, but it was like being at day camp. There weren't women on our campus really, and except, women that were visiting. And so it was guys hanging out. And so you can imagine the fraternity system and everything. And So when I took over, actually my first captain was a person who I rushed into my fraternity when I was the rushing chairman. And so, talk about having to draw lines. I really had to draw lines because my background with a lot of these guys was sitting around and playing cards, drinking beer, and, up to all sorts of mischief. And so it was a line, and it was a really hard line that was drawn, probably harder than you usually have to draw because you don't have that connection. I had to really separate myself from guys that I had a totally different interaction with prior to coaching them.
What were the benefits of taking over at that age and having the connection with guys? Did you see some benefits early on?
I don't know about that. I had been a captain and I'd been an assistant coach there for 2 years. And so I did have a relationship with him. I guess that's the benefit, but it was hard. It was really hard to, turn around and demand things from folks, who knew you in a different way. So the negatives were, I think, stronger than the positives, except it was a great first opportunity.
And did you set short-term goals for yourself in the program when you first took over? What were those?
Well, it's funny because I did this for all 42 years. Is my first goal is to win a game. And that may sound crazy with what we ended up doing, but I was 0-3 to start as a 24-year-old. And, but we won our first game on the buzzer down at Westfield State. And Dr. Steve Sartori was the Westfield State coach. I still remember it. And but it took me 4 games to even win one. And then we always talked about really sort of developing a winning culture, being a disciplined team, having discipline not only on the court but off the court. And so my goals really were to try to get us back in line a little bit from where we had been before that. And so. But we always try to win a game. We always try to win enough 10 games, so we'd be in double figures. And then back then we only played 24 games or scrimmages. And so if you won 12 games, you probably had a winning record. And then ECAC was all we could do back then. And we tried to qualify for the ECAC. And so those were like, more winning and losing, goals. But really what we were trying to do was to establish a culture that we felt could sustain not just 1 year, not just a game, but, for a long time.
You talk about winning culture. Did you, in the early days when you were establishing that winning culture, is that something that then became pretty much, pretty consistent over the years, like your expectations?
Yeah, it did. And it's really interesting what happens when you really develop an entire culture is that it's not just the older players taking the younger players under their wing. And, you would know about this, you bring in a guy who was first team all league, might be first team all state. And their expectations are they're going to play, but they're freshmen. You got seniors who are also the same thing when they were freshmen, and they've grown 3 more years. And so they're probably going to sit. And if they sit, that's hard. So it's hard for them. It's hard for their parents. And so the older kids take the younger kids and bring them along and say, hey, trust the process, be patient. Even better, maybe the parents. Okay, and now parents are involved so much, but the parents would turn to each other and basically put their arm around the parents of freshmen who were disappointed that their son wasn't playing more. And they'd say, hey, trust the process. This is a good thing. Our kid was in the same position. Relax, you'll be fine. Everything's going to be good. And so whether it's the parents keeping the parents in line. So I never really, in my years, I probably heard from 2 or 3 parents, probably 3 that I can remember, 3 parents. In 42 years, I heard from 3 parents that had issues with their son's playing time because the other parents were taking care of that. And the older players took care of the younger players. And so when you develop an entire culture, there's a little bit less work other than maintenance that coaches have to do. Every once in a while you put your foot down, but the culture sort of starts to take care of itself.
When you took over, you mimicked the style of play that you played under, or did you do something different in the first year or 2?
Yeah, I did something different, and I had sort of said to myself, this is what I want to do. I had some ideas, and I wanted to try to put them in place. I naturally grew up under my dad's stuff, and so there were bits and pieces, not so much exact plays or exact defenses, but concepts. And there were concepts that I took from the coach that I played for in college, and I learned quite a few things I didn't want to do. I always say that to coaches, young coaches, is that, listen to everybody, because you not only learn things you want to do, but you learn things you don't want to do. And that's as important as the things you want to do. It all heads you in the final direction that you're going to be at.
In the late 70s, early, I guess even through like the late 80s, I guess like that 10-year span, what was recruiting like to a Division III, highest of the high academics, and with no internet?
Yeah, it was really hard. I mean, first of all, it was snail mail. And so you might get an inquiry from the kid on the West Coast, which was 4 days late already. And, I did everything by phone. And, but, you go to camps. One summer I worked 9 weeks at camp, and you try to find 1, 2, 3 kids, and everything was a camp back then. They weren't a 2-day showcase. They were a 5 or 6 day full week camp. And so you got to know kids, you got to watch kids. Really hard with the academics and all. Our admissions directors back then, particularly the first one I came in under, was terrific. When he went to the West Coast, or wherever he traveled in the country, he had an eye out for athletic talent too. He'd come back with a handful of kids, and I'd get on the phone, and I'll never forget, we played, Kevin Small was a relatively young coach at Ursinus when we played them in the semifinals one year, and I was standing outside listening to his post-game press conference, and I was in next because we had just beaten them. And he said, Coach has got kids from all over the country. Like, he must have a hell of a recruiting budget. We don't. And so when I get in there, one of the guys asked me that question, and I had time to sort of think about it because I'd heard him give his answer. And he said, the reporter said to me, he said, Coach says you must have a hell of a recruiting budget. I said, no. I said, to tell you the truth, I'm really good on the phone. I said, that's what I am. And I said, whether it's with the mom and dad or whether it's with the kid, I said, I think I'm good on the phone, and I'm selling a great product. And that's how we get these kids, because we couldn't leave our campus to recruit. If we went to a game to watch a kid, if I went down to watch somebody play with you, I could not speak to those kids on that site. If I went to a game, I'm looking at all these coaches lining up to talk to the player I want. I can't talk to them. Those were our NESCAC rules, which were archaic. I don't know. I guess they just wanted to keep us limited. But anyway, so yeah, without the internet, it was really a strange thing. But I spent hours on the phone. It's funny because my wife is a very successful diving coach, just got inducted into UMass Hall of Fame, and raised our son as a diver who went on to be a 2-time Olympic medal winner. So she's a great coach. But when we both were recruiting, we had to go to different parts of the house because we both have coaching voices when we get on the enthusiasm. We couldn't do it in the same room or even next to each other. We had to separate. So, yeah, I just spent a lot of time on the phone, and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
And so with the challenges and limitations that you had, and then the academic standards built in, would you recruit and play based on the personnel that you had, determine your style of play year to year or a couple of years by a couple of years? Or were you also recruiting to a particular style of play that you wanted to play?
So, and the answer is sort of going to be split on both of those. So we tried, our goal was to recruit the kids that we felt could do the things we wanted them to do to fit our program. We didn't get that all the time. Matter of fact, I don't even know if it was maybe 50 or 60% of the time. It was really hard with admission. It got easier as the years went on when different admissions directors were around. But there were times when it was so strict. I remember having a list of 11 kids, and I got one kid out of my top 11. And so you took what you got, go down your list, and hopefully you got a big guy. Hopefully you get some, in between guys and some shooters and the whole thing. So years ago, they did an article on me in the NABC, which is the National Association of Basketball Coaches magazine. And it basically, the title of it was something like, he rolls with the punches or something like that. And And I think I'd been coaching about 28 years at the time, but it talked about the number of times we had changed our style, again, with some core principles that never change, okay? But I think that, whether we're big, whether we're small, whether it was slow, I had a really good point guard. Play it up. Okay, we good?
Mannix, you're muted.
I'm
And the recording stopped and then just started again.
Just stop for me for only like 3 seconds though.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Good. Okay. Technical difficulty, Coach. Sorry.
Change your position.
I know. Reposition myself a little bit here. So when you were recruiting, Coach, was there an Amherst College kind of guy? Like, what did that look like for you? What were the like absolute, necessities? Like, what weren't you going to be able to, kind of let slide? Like, what did you need?
Yeah, I mean, we needed someone that could get in, and that was really hard. But I like guys that could shoot the ball. But we always tried to find toughness because NESCAC in general, people thought, well, they're not as tough. They're suburbanites. They don't have this, they don't have that. And we used to play when Walsh was at Rhode Island. We used to play his team all the time because it was so tough and so physical that it would prepare us for NCAA schools out of our region that weren't NESCAC type schools. In other words, the NESCACs are sort of this, we execute, we shoot the ball, but teams like Trinity stand out in NESCAC because they're so physical. Okay, and they're doing a great job this year. I think they're 10-0 now or 9-0, and I watched them play there. As always, they're real physical, and so, we tried to mix it up a little bit. We had to have some kids that could defend. I wasn't out looking for all defenders. I wanted a mix of shooters and defend. You know what? I'd love to have somebody who could shoot the ball, defend, was quick, could dunk. Those are all the characteristics, right? But you're not going to get those kids. And so, we took all types of kids, but we tried to find kids that could score, kids that understood the game. Basketball IQ was an important thing to me because we do a lot of stuff. We break the game down for the kids. We don't tell the kids what to do. We teach them what to do. And the only way I think you can do that is to teach them what they're doing and against, and just to understand what they're doing. It's the only way they can really fully understand the game is, and this is why freshmen didn't play much in our system, was that they thought they understood the game, but they didn't really understand the game. And a guy who played for a good friend of mine, who I thought was a great coach, at the end of his first year, he shook his head and said, Coach, he said, I was in a really good high school program, but I found out I didn't understand basketball. I could play basketball, but I didn't understand it. And now I just feel like I'm that much better. But he didn't play much his freshman year for that reason. So we try to, I've had a couple non-learners, and those kids haven't been very successful in our program, unfortunately.
Early 2000s, Coach, you guys went on, like unprecedented success there. What was there a change? Was there an uptick in recruiting? Was it just that you guys had established yourself, and probably a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B, but I mean, just the run that you had really from 2000 until the day you stepped down. I mean, the wins, the success, the national championships. How did all that kind of turn into not just being a national program, but being a national champion?
Yeah, I think that I think I understood things. I grew as a coach. I think I understood things better. I think I understood recruiting better. The outreach seemed to get easier. In other words, we got connected with more kids. When you talked about the beginning of our program without the internet, and we didn't hear from California kids hardly, and how are we going to see them? And we're not allowed to leave the campus. And as things grew and rules changed a little bit, it gave us a little more access. And so I thought we recruited a little bit better. I understood the game more each year, and really started to implement some things that I thought were new and creative. But I'm going to tell you, probably the most important thing was I got married and had kids, and it just made me a better person, not so myopic. I was so obsessed before; it was my life. I mean, that's what I did. I coached, and misspent my time, my other time. And when I got married and had kids, it really grounded me. My wife, again, is a very good coach. She would tell me when she thought I was screwing up, not X and O wise, but she'd ask me questions. My 5-year-old son came in, 4-year-old, 5-year-old son came into my room one night, midnight, and shook him. And if you've had kids and if your kid wakes up at midnight, something's wrong. And he says to me, Dad, like he used to do. And I said, what, Michael, what, are you okay? He go, Dad, when Harper comes back from his broken foot, who are you going to start, him or Ray? I'm thinking, like, this damn kid's going to be a coach. It's midnight. He's asking me questions about who I'm going to play when he gets back. But all that stuff that families give you and that stronger relationships give you, a good marriage, it made me better. It absolutely 100%. I'm not recommending to all the young coaches out there that they go out and get married tomorrow and then it's going to make them a better coach. It's all going to be the right time and the right thing. But when it happened to me, I don't think it was coincidental that we got better.
We hope Paul's girlfriend isn't listening to this podcast.
Yeah, she's not going to watch this one.
Might put him in a tough situation. But on that, I find that really interesting. You said it made you a better coach on the pains of coaching and the stress. Do you feel like you stressed less about coaching in the program when you were married and had a family, or maybe did you stress about different things or fewer things?
Yeah, no, I stress about different things. I mean, you're always thinking about, I'll never forget one day we're getting ready to play Williams, big deal for us. And we're just building a new facility and I happen to be in charge of that. And so we do our shoot around, we're leaving the building and I go in and we've just painted this new indoor track. And it was painted with, of course, purple and on the track and a leak that had happened. And that's my wife, Hammer. I got to tell her to stop that. She heard me. I'm stressing about that now. So anyway, I look over there. I'm carrying my son. He's 2 years old. He came at my practice because my wife's at her practice. So I got a lot of things filling my mind and everything, my focus. And it just, instead of worrying from 8 o'clock in the morning until we played at 8 at night, what good does that do anybody, right? How many times can you review certain things in your mind? My life was fuller. It was distraction. So I took my son and I had to set my son down so I could mop up the water so it didn't ruin the track. I don't know, doing too much. I guess you guys understand that though. And so I do think that it was spread out. There were just other things that took my mind off just sitting there and grinding away on facts that how many times can you grind on it? 8 hours, 10 hours? No, you got to free it up a little bit. So it was good.
Can you compare and contrast the 2007, 2013 teams and seasons?
Do I do what?
Can you compare the two?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, first of all, they both had great guards. Andrew Olson was a great point guard. He's with the Cavaliers now as their player development coach and wonderful player. And then Aaron Toomey was a wonderful player, more of a scoring point guard. Although Andrew could score, he loved assists and he was a magician with the ball. The 2017 was much deeper, just went on and on and on, and much bigger. I'll never forget when we won the national championship that year. Their kid Brendan Adair, who's now an NBA official, by the way, he was Player of the Year, I think 2 consecutive years. But he's Player of the Year in the country that year. And when they lost, they were interviewing him and they said, "Well, gee, they held you down pretty good. How'd they hold you down?" He said, "Well, the guy that was guarding was 6'5", and I got by him and I ran into a 6'7" kid. And I got by him and I ran into a 6'10" kid. He said, that's a problem. And that's how we were. That was the 2017. The 2013 team rather, was not as deep. We probably ran 7, maybe 8 kids that could contribute at a national level. But they just, maybe because of the lower number, they knew each other. I'm sitting with John Feinstein after the game, who asked if he could see me, the famous author, of course. And I said, he said to me, he said, Coach, he said, I was just amazed. I watched the team. He said, you'd come down and you'd call a certain play like 2, and I saw like 5 different versions, but I didn't see any other calls. How did you know what you? And I said, well, it's just the guys reading each other. And I thought the 2013 team took that to the highest level of any team that I've had, a team that maybe because there was only, like I say, 7 of them, 8 of them. And so they really understood each other, but they played off each other like no other team I've had. And that's hard to guard. I don't know how you got it, right? Because you do this, I do that. You do that, I do this. And so they were really good at that. And they had just the right, it's like, and but they're both really good teams in different ways.
What was it? You already shared a little bit of it, but what was a household like of 2 Hall of Fame coaches?
Yeah, no, it's great. And it's funny. So my oldest son played athletics and he likes athletics, but he wasn't very talented athletically. Or at least he felt maybe that he wasn't going to be, because his younger brother was the best of everything. When he played a sport, no matter what it was, he was the best of it. That was the future Olympian. And so you had athletics, my poor oldest son, it was, athletics all the time, competition. We still have competition, silly competitions because we compete at everything. But he went into film editing, and that's what he is, his film editor now. Very good at it too. But he, the poor kid was surrounded with athletic stuff and competition like every minute of his life. And that's made him better too. But yeah, and we still compete. We golf. Matter of fact, we would have golfed this morning, except I'm doing this. But my wife and I golfed yesterday and the day before, and she's very good at that. And we try not to get too competitive out there because that takes the fun out of being able to play with each other. So no, it's an interesting household for sure.
And you and I, when we spoke on the phone a couple weeks ago, you talked for quite a while about your coaching tree, the assistants that you've had move on. And we've talked to other coaches about that before, but not from, I think, the standpoint of the structure of Division III coaching staffs, where I know you have some part-time guys, full-time guy, maybe in between. So the coaches that have moved on to be head coaches, which you have plenty, and feel free to, name whoever you'd like. What responsibilities, did you give them? And then kind of, I guess, outside the lines, like what were you doing for your coaching tree to try to prepare them? Like, an Aaron Toomey that's now head coach at Hartford. What was that like for your assistant coaches and how you worked with them and mentored them?
Yeah, and so I would say that for those guys, Matt Goldsmith down at College of New Jersey, Kevin Hopkins at Muhlenberg, Luke Flacurzy up at Rochester, Mark Gilbride at RPI, those coaches, and Aaron Toomey at Hartford. By the time I got to those coaches, I was giving a lot more responsibility. Very unusual for me, but later in my career, I would have Kevin Hopkins down working with the big guys, because he's certainly better working with the big guys than I am, right? 6'10". And I'd have Aaron Toomey down working with the guards, because Aaron's a hell of a lot better guard than I even dreamt to be. And so I'd have those 2 guys, and I would be overseeing it. I never thought I could do that. Early on, I didn't think I could let go and let go of some of that responsibility. And I was always watching and always critiquing the next day or that afternoon after practice, but gave them a lot of responsibility. And I'd have my bench was always such I had one assistant on one side and one assistant on the other side. And so I always had stuff going in both ears. And, I think that helped them all. And a great story, Mark Gilbride, whose dad is, I think, an outstanding coach up at Bowdoin College. One of the few guys that's ever run a really good matchup. And it was hard to break. It's a really good coach. And so his son comes to work for me, and I said, look, I want you to tell me everything you know about all these different teams. I said, but I'll never ask you about your dad's team. And he looked at me and he said, Coach, I work for you now. I don't work for him. I thought if my dad heard me say that, that would be end of our relationship, right? But anyway, so I said, well, then we're going to talk about matchup, right? And that afternoon, we devised a zone offense, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. And it basically has like 5 rules and called cutters. It's on a DVD now out with championship. And I just lectured on it at the state coaches clinic. And Mark and I sat there, and I wanted to know everything that his dad's matchup had trouble with. And we integrated that. And I felt that afternoon I became a better zone offense coach by far. So I've learned from my assistants too. They all have different ideas. Kevin Hopkins, again, knows more about being a big guy than I do. And so I think they've learned from me. I've learned from them. But I love to watch them, and I drive my wife crazy sometimes because I have 3 or 4 devices going at night. Like last night, I was trying to watch Matt Goldsmith, Kevin Hopkins, and Luke Flacurzy play. And tonight I'll watch Aaron's team is playing. And I was also trying to get Tufts and St. Joe's of Connecticut, both top ranked teams right now, in at the same time. So I got also my wife says to me, she goes, I sort of liked it better when you had to go on the road and scout out, because you were gone for a while. But when you came down, I had to, but now it's like you're just watching all this stuff. And but it's great fun. And I know one of the questions was how you stayed involved. That's one of the ways, because then we talk about their games. Yeah. But even yesterday, I got a text from a guy who's out of the game now, but loves the game. And he said, Coach, I was watching Georgetown Merrimack play the other night, and Merrimack is running this really funky zone. And you watch it on Synergy and tell me what you think and what you'd run against it. So that's what I was doing before I talked to you guys this morning. I went for a walk, but then I also watched the half of Synergy of watching this zone that Merrimack ran and what my thoughts were going to be on that. And so, I love talking about the game and breaking the game down. So I probably didn't answer your question, but it was close.
No, that's good. How much, I'm just curious, I didn't write this down, but how much do you text your guys after you watch them?
Well,
how much call or text do you
Yeah, I'm very sensitive about that, depending on how they do. There's certain things they don't want to hear naturally. And so I give them a little time depending on how tough it was or whatever, and give them words of encouragement. But almost every guy I have communication with after they play. And it's different than it used to be. Again, before the internet, I'd be asleep and the phone would ring, it'd be midnight. And be one of my guys saying, Coach, you asleep? And I'd say, well, I'm not asleep now. What's up? And they'd say, we got absolutely throttled tonight. I need to talk to you. I got a player problem with this guy, a player problem with that guy. And so it used to be mostly by phone before we had texting, and all that stuff. But I still really enjoy talking the game with them all the time. And one of them, they've asked me to be the head coach of the TBT team next summer. And I've told them I don't think so. And I'd be an assistant, but I don't think, I've been out of the game, 3.5, 4 years, but they still like my eye. They still like how I think about the game. And I think I can add something to the staff, but I don't really think I want to be the head coach, but we'll see.
And certainly Division I's dealing with different things now, and not, Division III, not there now. Hopefully, I don't know, hopefully it wouldn't get there based on the model, but what you see in the game right now, any kind of concerns that you have, any sort of hope that you have for the game moving forward, more so towards the coaches, Just kind of in your mind, like from things that you see? I mean, recruiting world's a little bit different, but what do you hope for the game moving forward for coaches?
Well, I think that a couple different areas, and I hadn't even thought of this until you started to speak, but the transfer portal thing is crazy. And I think back to my team of 2007, the championship team. I had 4 seniors that were really good, but the junior class was all played overseas professionally when they graduated. So there were 5 of them, and they were big too, and they didn't play much as freshmen. Olsen did, the point guard, but like Kevin Hopkins is a great example. If today was today, if then was today, he might have been in the transfer portal, and you could say, well, he's not going to give up the Amherst education. Well, he can go to Princeton, Harvard, or Yale. And so I always felt that with this transfer portal thing, for us, that we could become a farm system for other good academic schools, Dartmouth, Princeton, Harvard, Yale, whatever. Patriot League with a scholarship. I mean, good education, great education with scholarships. And so I always worried about, if you really developed a good big kid, would you lose him if he wasn't playing? And so I worry about the transfer portal thing. I mean, you're listening to TV. I know they've limited it, I believe, to twice now, but you listen to TV and someone says, well, this is his 4th team. And I'm going like, are you kidding me? And so I think what's happened is that kids, it's great on the one hand that they might get an opportunity. On the other hand, the resilience of not playing and the stick-to-itiveness that you always taught kids, like a kid comes in as a freshman, it's hard not playing. And to say, well, what does coach want? And figure out how to talk to the coach to figure out what he wants, and then work at it to get better so that you can play. There are a ton of lessons just in that statement, right? And I think now kids look and say, well, no, I'm not going to play. Rather than try to get better, I'm moving on to this program. And I'm moving on to this program. So I worry about that. I do. It was funny. I was having an argument with my youngest son about football, because, now a guy, it's not even a touchdown anymore. A guy recovers a fumble and the whole team sprints to the end zone, and they sit down and, they row their oars and they flap their wings, and it's all this choreographed stuff. And I'm thinking, like, where are we going with this? I love basketball still as a technical foul. And, there's so much AAU stuff, and there are really good AAU programs, but there's so much bad AAU stuff too, where, kids now, they got to glower over each other. They got to talk about this. They got to talk about too small. They got to talk about this and all that stuff. And I'm thinking, like, I can't even keep up with what signals I'm supposed to be given anymore. But, the taunting piece of it, again, I think it takes away from the game. I think that, so I hope they keep that under wraps in basketball. And I think they have, and it's because the technical foul, although it's an assessment, it's not so much that, that you're out for the game. And if you get a second one, maybe, but so, I think they've found a way to curb it a bit. I've seen a bunch of different taunting calls made, which I think is important. I think that there's unbelievable athleticism in the game right now. And, all this dribble drive stuff, and I used it too, but, I think that people have sort of downgraded Xing and Oing. And you could say, well, you only got 30 seconds, Coach. What can you do? You can do a lot. I mean, we did a ton of stuff. We sort of semi-invented some, nothing's ever totally invented, but we took some stuff and tweaked it and made it better, to where I thought we got really easy shots, okay, based on some execution pieces. And I think some of the execution, you could say, well, it's just a different kind of execution. But when people are just dribbling and driving and using their athleticism, well, I think that'll bring the zone back, by the way. If you can't play people, you might as well play zone, right? Make them shoot from the outside. But I just, hope we don't lose that piece of it, because one of the funnest things that I had was sitting down, whether it was Mark Gilbride or Kevin Hopkins or Aaron Toomey loves to do this stuff. And we would create something. We will have seen something on tape or something, but we would take it, tweak it, bend it, and then try it in practice. And all of a sudden we'd have a great play. I mean, we drove Tufts University crazy with this one little play that we ran, because just when they thought they'd figured out the 2 options that we had a third one. And when they thought they'd added that one, the next time we had a 4th one. And that we just stayed one step ahead of the curve. And I loved doing that stuff. And so I think the execution piece, I hope our athleticism doesn't take away from the ability to really coach. I mean, to do some other, I consider that coaching. Maybe that's what, maybe people don't consider it that as much anymore. But I watch some of these teams now, and if you got better athletes, you break people down. What's the counter to that? I mean, that was me. I was always thinking counters. If you're that good at that, what am I going to do over here? And so I hope we don't lose that, because I think that's really a fun part and a good part of coaching.
More off the court for coaches. The nature of the business has coaches moving around a lot, right? Was there a point in time where you knew, maybe it was 1977 or maybe it was after, where you said Amherst College is the right spot for me, and long term, meaning 40 plus years? And how did you know that?
Well, I don't know. It all came really down to feeling. I had a few very good job offers, and I remember calling my dad up and saying, "Dad, I got this great job offer. I need your advice." And he goes, "Go ahead." So I started to talk, and he didn't say much. My dad was that kind of guy. He'd give me a what else? And so he didn't give me anything. And I talked myself all the way around to staying at Amherst, like him making me talk it through. And I found out what I really wanted at that point. And then I had another situation where I had a great job offer later on. And I was driving my son home from Connecticut, my oldest son, and I said, "Hey, there's a driving range. Let's go hit a bucket of balls." And so we're just getting out of the car and the phone rings. I looked at it, and it was the school. And so I said, I got to take this. I said, "Get a bucket. I'll be out in 3 minutes." Half hour later, I'm out at the driving range. He's sitting down. All the balls are gone. And he looks at me. He said, "That was so-and-so, wasn't it?" And I said, "It was." He goes, "Good job?" I said, "It's a great job." And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, let me ask you a question." I said, "You like being at Amherst?" And he looked at me and he goes, "I love being at Amherst." And that was like one of the answers I was looking for. My family became more important. We were grounded. My wife had a great job at University of Massachusetts, which she had to go 3 miles to get to work. I had to go 3.2 to get to work. I mean, how does it get any better than that? And our kids were so happy where they were. And I'm thinking, like, is it worth it? Is it worth the money? The culture that we've built at Amherst was this wonderful thing. And, looking back on it, it was the right decision. There's a lot of money out there. That's the confounding issue, I think, today, is if you do make it, you're making millions of dollars, And, but on the other hand, I don't even think $1 million can make up for the relationships that I have. I don't know how you develop those in 3 years and then move. And if you don't win, you get fired. I mean, I know some good friends of mine who've gotten fired that made the move from 3 to 1, coached there for a couple of years, and then, got fired. Now they're looking again. And so I said this at the Hall of Fame. I didn't think it could get, when I retired, I didn't think it could get any better. My players put together this videotape for me of past games and stuff, but also of messages from people. And yet I was crying most of the time listening to it. It was so emotional listening to what people were saying. And can you develop that over a really short period of time? You will with some kids, but maybe not with many. And then they named the court after me, and we had a 2-day event for that. And I thought, like, this is heaven. Like, this doesn't get any better than this. And then I don't get any of that. And that quantify in dollars and cents. And so making a commitment to school, having the school make the commitment to you, having a family grow. Think of 42 years of family that has grown. And then guys on the front end that I didn't coach, but that joined the family because of what we were doing. When you look back and you count all the things, that's some pretty powerful stuff there that it's tough you can't quantify in dollars and cents. So I loved what I did. I wouldn't change it. Today, before I knew, I might take another job just because of all the money. I mean, the money's so tempting out there right now. It's unbelievable. But, again, I think if you get in a good place, and can do what you want in your life outside of your basketball. And that all came together for me. And so that's sort of a long strung out answer, but that's sort of how I feel about all that.
You didn't mess with happy and you don't regret it, right? So
Where'd you get that?
Dick Vitale, I think. I remember hearing him years ago say on TV, don't mess with happy.
Okay, well, it's funny because years ago I said that and I didn't know if I heard it from this guy named Happy. And I didn't know. The first time I met him, he worked on the grounds crew with me up at Andover. And he didn't speak to anybody but me. It was one of those, he was a gentle giant.
Mm.
And one day he looked at me and he used to call me Hickey Man. He goes, Hickey Man, don't mess with Happy. And I didn't know whether he meant it like you just meant it. But he meant, don't mess with him, right? And so a friend of mine, Nick Nichols, was our swim coach, went down, and the job that he had been waiting his whole life for, he'd been an assistant at Yale for years. He went down and interviewed at Yale, and he didn't take the job. And when they asked him, all the alums are sitting around that he had coached down there, and they said, "What? How come you're not taking this? Is ridiculous. You're staying at Amherst over Yale." And he goes, "Well, there's a good friend of mine, the basketball coach up at Amherst, and he told me don't mess with Happy. And you know something, I'm happy." And he didn't take it. And guys were drunk that night, run around the Yale campus yelling, "Don't mess with Happy." So I don't know where I got it. I thought I got it from Happy, but maybe it was through Dick Vitale too. So
We'll give Happy, we'll give the big fella Happy the credit there, I think, on this episode. That's good. That's good. But Coach, we're going to transition into lighter side here with a couple just kind of fun casual questions. Paul, you want to kick it off with that one special question you had for Coach about his golfing background?
Yeah, Coach, as a fellow golfer, what's your favorite course in Western Mass, and then also the best course you've ever played?
So those are really hard questions. I don't know. Western Mass might be Crumpin Fox.
Great
just
spot.
because of the way it's cut out through the trees and
Yeah.
so well kept. And you know, you can hardly see one hole from the next, and they're all differently shaped. And I think they've done a great job up there. But that's certainly a nice course in Western Mass. The best course I've ever played. I've played so many great courses now, but I went to Ireland, and this place called Old Head, which Rick Riley, if you read Rick Riley's book on golf, it's one of his 18 scariest holes, and it goes out on a peninsula. There's a big cavern that goes underneath it, so birds fly from that side right underneath you and out the other side. If the fog rolls in and you hit the hole, make a wrong step, you could fall 250 feet into the ocean. There's no rails or no nothing, right? And so when you're sitting there, you got to go over all this stuff. I don't know if you've ever seen in the Irish courses, but look up Old Head. A guy was out there in his bulldozer helping shape the thing, and it started to teeter. So he jumped off, and his bulldozer fell 250 feet. It's called Paulie's Leap into the ocean, and it's still there. And but that's how you feel when you're hitting so you're there with these caddies, and the caddies are hilarious over there. But they'll go, just see that rock out there, aim at that rock, you know. And it's like I could hit a rock, right? And but it was great fun to try to play a little bit target, because you get in a lot of trouble. But when we went to Ireland and played Lahinch and Old Head and Waterville and some great courses. But I think the courses over there were as fun of courses as I've ever played. Played some really fun and interesting places. We have a lot of wealthy alums who want to golf with Coach. And so my wife and I have sort of done the tour the last 3 years and been from Massachusetts all the way down, played over at Pinehurst with a former assistant of mine, and played out on the coast of Carolina. And so a lot of great golf, a lot of fun. I wish I was as good a golfer as the golf courses I've played.
You are making retirement sound really, really good.
Well, let me tell you something. Retirement is vastly underrated. When you're ready, but you have to be ready.
You have to be ready. Yeah, yeah. Well, Coach, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you this. In case you ever need help moving stuff from Massachusetts to Florida, our sponsor for this show is 5 College Movers based out of the Northampton Amherst area.
I know them.
And Pat McWilliams and the guys at 5 College Movers, I'm sure would be happy to move your clubs from Massachusetts to Florida, especially in the winter. But that's another story. So, your favorite sports movie, Coach, non-basketball sports movie?
Yeah, and so I knew when you wrote me and told me you're going to ask that, I had to think about it a little bit because there's a handful of them and they're all a little bit different. I'm a Costner guy.
Yeah,
Kevin Costner, and I think if I had to choose one, it would probably be For the Love of the Game, which is a baseball movie. But as my wife said this morning when I was bouncing that off her, she said that movie moved me the most. And I don't think there's a time that I've watched that movie that I didn't emotionally struggle, with emotion. And but there's some, all of his stuff, but on the lighter side, I love Tin Cup, man. I love Tin Cup. Bull Durham, I mean, it doesn't get much better than Bull Durham. And so I think when you get to the sort of the rah-rah, a little bit goose 'em up, I'm not a hockey guy per se, but I know Miracle on Ice is a fun one to watch. But I'd have to go back to For the Love of the Game if you'd made me choose one.
How about your favorite basketball movie?
Hoosiers.
Hoosiers. Yeah.
And Hoosiers would be in that first group too. I mean, that's a tough one to beat for me. And it's a tough one to beat for me because, again, I think I'm an old time guy. I'm an old school guy. I was brought up and I made some changes as we went along that old Bobby Knight would have rolled over in his boat. We grew up under Bobby Knight, and so you were disciplinarian. That was an important piece to what you did. And, I watched what he did in that movie, and it just, it's cool stuff. There's so many great things that you can pull out of that as a coach, in my opinion. And so it's more than a movie,
Yeah.
Really cool.
And a last fun question for you here, Coach. Your most memorable or entertaining technical foul?
So I had to laugh, and I was trying to decide whether I could tell this or not, because I didn't get that many technicals. I deserved a lot more than I got. I'll never forget. I was down in this isn't a technical story, but I'll lead into it. I was down in Virginia, and we're down 13-5 or something 4, and we're down 7-0 in fouls. So a guy comes over, stands next to my bench, and I looked at him and I pointed at the scoreboard and I said, "You see that up there, right there?" I said, "I'm not talking about the score, but the score is somewhat indicative of the fouls. Look at 7-0. Really?" And I just left that to boil a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Ball gets inbounds, and he blows his whistle, and the guy might have just touched somebody like this. He called foul on them, right? And they rotated. Ball gets inbounded again. Touch foul. Same guy calls it again. Rotates 3 times. Calls these chicken fouls, right? Gets all right in front of my bench again. He's standing there like this with his whistle in his mouth. He looks at me. He goes, "You feeling a little bit better, Coach?" And when he said that to me, I knew I was in trouble, because that meant he was God. That meant he controlled the game. If he could do what he just did to make a point to me, you feel better about that, Coach. But I'll tell you quickly. So first year we could go up to the NCAAs. NESCAC. It's coming down to the wire. We go up to Maine. We got to play Bowdoin. We got to play Colby. And if we win 2, we could host the whole thing. If we lose 2, we're out. That's how thin it is in NESCAC when you only play each other once. So we go up there, and I see the Bowdoin AD, who's new, and he said, "Boy, this is really exciting, isn't it?" I said, "Well, it is, but it's a lot of pressure." I said, "We haven't felt this kind of pressure to win 1 or 2 games before." And I said, makes coaches behave maybe differently than they ordinarily would. I didn't realize that was a foreshadowing, right? So we're up like 13-5 or something like that. And Timmy Gilbride, again, one of my favorites, goes absolutely bonkers. He goes out in the middle of the court. He's beat red. He's yelling and screaming, calls a timeout first, of course, so he can get his guys off the court, and pretend he's going out just to circle around. And so they put up with it. And I thought, like, wow. So anyway, Next thing you know, it's 15-13 them, and we are really getting the wrong end of the whistle, which he knows how to coach. I think he had a great influence on what just happened. And this guy, Clay Halliday, who I ended up having a great relationship with over time, did all the games up in Maine. And I thought he was such a homer. But anyway, so I look out on the court and I said, "Hey, Clay," I said, "come on." I said, "Give us a fair shake on the whistle, right?" I said, "This is a big game." And so I said, "Give me a timeout." So as he's walking the timeout, I said, "Clay," I said, "come on, this is a huge game." I said, nobody needs to get screwed up here like that." Well, I'm in the huddle, probably 20 seconds, and I hear a whistle and a cheer. And I'm in the huddle 20 seconds. I'm almost done. And Ronnie Buell, my old longtime assistant, puts his head in the huddle. He goes, "Hicks, you just got teed up." So I just kept coaching. And so then I come out of the huddle, and Bruce McGregor was the other official. And I said to Bruce, "Bruce, ask him." So I called to Clay. I said, "Clay, come here." And as he's walking over, I said, "Clay, why'd you tee me up?" And he looked at me and he pointed at me and he said, "Because you used the word screw."
And before we sign off here, Coach, I number one, of course, I want to thank you for doing this, and taking time out of your morning for doing this. But I tell this story on occasion if your name ever comes up. I can remember December, this time of year, almost to the day. We got back, my team, we got back from a December tournament in New Jersey, and I had Joe Schneider playing for me as a senior that year.
I love Joe.
It was December of 2014. We had lost in the championship of a tournament down in New Jersey at the buzzer. And that was on a poor judgment with the referees to replay a play. I won't go down that road right now. But I remember talking to you a day or two later. And I think probably because you sensed things in my voice, I think you must have spent over a half hour on the phone with me. And probably 10 or so minutes of that was you also giving me a little bit of X's and O's about how to defend a play side out of bounds with just a couple seconds left. And he gave me some simple stuff, but it was great. Some things I had never heard. And but I just remember you spending time with me that day on the phone. And I can remember hanging up and feeling a little bit better, but you also just left me with the sense of like, we've all been there. Now it's like what you learn from it. And so, here we are. That's almost 9 years to the day. And I remember that call sitting at my desk right over there like it was yesterday. And so like what you've done here today and what you've done, for the past 40 something years, it's not lost on us that are in coaching. So we appreciate you.
Well, and thank you. Mark Kilbride used to laugh because some old timer would walk by my office and stick his head in. And, I could tell you from a retirer's point of view, you got nothing else to do. So you stick your head and you think the coach can spend a half hour with you, right? And when they sit down, it's at least a half hour. But they'd come in and we'd be Xing and Oing up at the board. And I'd say, "Hey, how you doing?" He'd say, "Good." He said, "Hey, I just want to come by and see how you're doing." And so I look at the assistants to sort of give them and I'd spend a half hour with the guy. And they'd all go like, at first, Mark Kilbride would tell the story. I didn't understand it. And then he said, in the end, I do understand it. He said, because this is what coach does. And I think we all got to give each other our time. I think coaching can really be a lonely profession, particularly if you're struggling. And I think the more people that are willing to talk and spend time with each other and talk about similar experiences, I think it's great. So this for me, I love doing this, and I love talking about sport and basketball in particular and coaching. I love coaching.
Yeah. Well, Coach, we appreciate your time today. Our guest, Coach Dave Hixon, Hall of Famer, Amherst College national champion. And we appreciate everybody listening today to the Coaching Ladder, brought to you by 5 College Movers. And we will have this out here on Monday night for episode number 102, again with our guest Dave Hixon. So, Coach, thanks again.
Welcome, guys. Good luck.
Thanks, Coach.
Everybody, good luck.
Appreciate it.